happen over and over and over again in Fordiana. Whenever a decent organisation gets happening, the people who run it get old, they wither, they die, and the whole thing falls apart. What I've been doing, and like I said earlier in my introduction, I'm doing my best. The most important thing of what we do here is that we are involving the younger generation. And the younger generation isn't just people like these three delightful young ladies who helped me make that very silly film at the beginning. It's people like our next speaker. My wife and I were at a bug show in Yeovil 18 months ago. And here was a massively excited young man of 17 rushing about, and he told me he'd spent £160 on tropical bug larvae. Now, come on, that's good, isn't it? Come on, aren't you impressed by that? Okay, that's a straw poll. What's better, car theft, Pokemon and throwing bricks through windows?
Pokemon.
Or, oh, shut up. Oh, for God's sake, Oliver. What's better, all those signs of moral degeneracy, or spending 160 quid on bug larvae? We made friends with this young man. He came down to visit us, and to show really he has exactly the right moral fibre for the CFZ, he stayed up drinking tequila with me and Graham till 4 in the morning and was sick. I'm very proud of him. So I'm now going to introduce, Richard Freeman is now going to introduce the guy who's probably, together with Dave up there, going to have my job in 10 years' time.
Thank you. Max Blake is on a one-man, rocket-fueled mission of self-destruction. His quest is for the total moral, physical and mental degeneration. He will achieve this by a series of occult rituals in which he will debase himself in the most extreme forms imaginable. He's entitled this whole project Pony from the Farm. Max Blake.
Thank you, Richard. Indeed, secret sharks, cryptid cockroaches and furtive fish. Welcome to the undescribed species in the pet trade. The pet trade has been going on for way too long for me to remember. The first fish were brought into China in the 1400s. They were developed over the years, became the various species of goldfish we have at the moment, and then were later followed once the invention of the tropical heater was finally made by various species such as neon tetras, cardinal tetras, guppies, all the extremely familiar fish that we know and love today. So, in this talk, we'll look at cryptid cockroaches. I just thought I needed a clicker.
Bloody clue.
Dave, how does this work?
Forwards and backwards, 2 buttons.
Oh yes, it works.
Well, hey!
We will start very small indeed. Small animals are the best animals. They need the least, well, they need comparatively little amounts of care. They can be kept in little tiny boxes. They're much more simple than trying to keep a leopard or a zebra. I can tell you from experience. But we'll quickly look at Polyphaga aegyptica, a very small, unassuming cockroach. It mainly sits underneath sand all day long, nibbling small bits of wood and leaves. But this particular species is found from Egypt all the way up to Georgia. But there's one little mountain range where something goes a little bit weird, because we have this, Polyphaga species armenia. This is an undescribed species. It's known from the very tiny country of Armenia on one tiny little mountain range above 18,000 metres, 1,800 metres, sorry, where there is a large belt of about 200 metres between this species and Polyphaga aegyptica. Now, quite why that should occur, and why indeed this species has speciated into what it is now, is not yet known because no one's done any research on it. But hopefully we will change that in the due course of time. So, yes, cockroaches is what we're starting with. This is a fantastic species, I have to say. It's about 12 millimetres long, which makes it, unfortunately, sort of foot fodder for the natives who live in the lands of Kenya. It's a remarkable species in that generally among cockroaches and amongst things like moths, females are quite often found wingless, but males have wings. Now this allows in the breeding season the female to release a load of pheromones and then for the males to all flutter their way along to try and get to the female first to mate. Now in this species, the one shown above is a male. The males have no wings, but the females have wings. And they can fly. Now this doesn't make much sense, and indeed I can't think of any reason for a female having wings and yet the male not having wings, unless it's got something to do with what's called sexual selection, whereby a pressure is bestowed on an animal to develop new characteristics in the fight to mate. So for instance, deer have antlers, because even though they are a huge disadvantage for having antlers, more weight means they run slowly, they get caught in bushes and brambles and things like that. Yet the need to fight, and then the winner of course mates, makes having antlers actually quite a handy thing for deer. So that's one very strange species. The Sotria species Cubal1, one of two different species of Sotria, not known actually it's a species name at all. This is a male, and you can see how small the wings are compared to the actual body length. They are not enough to actually carry the species off the ground at all, and are mainly used in defence when it's burrowing through leaves and wood and things in its natural environment. But this species has more reduced wings than any other of the males in its genus, which, again, is a bit strange. The other males can fly, and even if they can't necessarily fly to actually escape predators all the way up, if they are halfway up a tree or on a rock or on a log or something, they can just flutter down to the ground and quickly bury, which is obviously quite handy. And my personal favourite, Eublabrus species Pantanal, from the Pantanal region of Brazil. It's a species we have bred collectively with CFZ, and we have a number of little babies scampering around, and I myself have a fairly large colony. It's quite unusual in that all the other species of its genus are well known for being, amongst cockroaches at least, the only cockroaches that are predatory. All the other species are omnivorous to various degrees, but the other Eublabrus will actually attack and eat other cockroaches. This species doesn't seem to do that very much. It will take the wings off some individuals or the legs of very much weaker individuals, but generally it doesn't do this, which is really quite weird. And again, it's a much darker species than the others in the genus, but that's not enough to make it necessarily a new species of sign. That's right. From Tanzania in Africa, a whole raft of new species has flown into the pet trade. We have small cockroaches, like this, which is the African bullet roach, which was collected at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro, which you thought we fairly well explored in 1997. They are fairly small, fairly unassuming, reasonably pretty, but they breed so well that they are being used as a feeder food for small amphibians and reptiles in the herpetology trade, which is quite strange. An undescribed species, not even actually known to genus level, to family only, being used as feeder food, which is a shame. We have this Platymerus species Mombo, a giant species of assassin bug, twice the size of anything else in its genus. Extremely aggressive. Females, like the one pictured, will take anything up to about 8 times their own body weight and subdue it in, well, a prolonged period of fighting, which the assassin bug usually does win. They were collected outside the very small town of Mombo, as I say, in Tanzania. This is a not very interesting wood. Not very interesting looking species of scorpion, probably found from genus Pandenius. It's probably a known species, but it is being hailed in the pet trade as being something new, which is a fairly common way of getting people to buy something. If you say, oh, it's something completely new, it's no one else has got one of these, but you should have one of these because it's new. And they try and sell quite a lot. A funny looking species of trapdoor spider, nothing much to say. And this rather weird centipede. It's a giant species, about 6 inches long. But if you look along the back, you can see that the final pair of legs have elongated really quite remarkably, and got these funny feather-like appendages on the end. Now, why this should be, no one knows because no one's looked into it yet. Again, the species is not known. It's known to genus though. I forget the genus. I'm sorry. But it appears to be a sensory function or something to do with signalling between the species. But again, no one knows. No one has any idea about this. And now, Olivia's graduation shrimp. Olivia was given 2 very small, unassuming red and white shrimp for graduating from Portsmouth. Thank you.
You want to say who Olivia is?
Oh yeah, Olivia is John's stepdaughter, and standing right at the back. If you'd like to all look around and embarrass her, I'd be very grateful.
Wave, Olivia!
Thank you very much. She was given 2 of these little fellows, which are a recessive red and white colour morph of the bee shrimp, which is that little black and white fellow in the bottom corner. They come from Central and Southeast Asia, as do other members of the genus Caridina, which this is indeed from. A number of species of this genus have flown into the pet trade recently, with all sorts of colour morphs like the green and the tiger. Now these are all being hailed as new species, but in captivity at least, they all, well, most of them hybridise to produce intermediate forms. So you can have a green shrimp with tiger stripes, for instance, and they all breed true to that colour form, which means they're all probably members of the same species, but all slightly different geographical variants. But never mind. Okay, vertebrates at last. This is an unknown species of danio, which is a small shoaling fish. This was found by aquarists in India, who noticed that in amongst a tank of fairly normal-looking danio fish, there was this, which no one knew what it was. So they bought it, they took it home, and they kept it, and it grew up to be this rather magnificent creature, who was about 1 inch long. No others have been found. No one knows where it was originally collected from. And it was probably found in India. The extent of our knowledge on the species is indeed shown on there. It's a complete mystery. It isn't even... The genus is supposedly danio, which is fairly common, which is the zebra danio is often found in pet shops and in laboratories as well. But we really know nothing about it. There we go. This is now called Danio margaritatus. It came into the hobby in 2006 and sold very, 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 very well because it's a small species, very calm, very peaceful, and of course extremely pretty. Even though they're being sold at comparatively high price, so about £4 or £5 a piece, pet stores couldn't sell enough of them. It came in as being called Microraspora species Galaxy. This was then changed to the celestial pearl danio when someone noticed that it wasn't actually a Raspora, it was a, sorry for this, it was a danio, and eventually it was described as being Celestiphes margaritatus by a comparatively poor review which did things entirely based on morphological characteristics, which means that they looked at the number of scales along the lateral line, the number of rays in the fins, and colour variations and things. This was then disproved last year in 2008 by a more comprehensive DNA study, which showed it to be a danio like the zebra danio already mentioned. Whether it gets split back into its original genus, if someone comes along and changes it, we don't yet know, but hopefully it'll just stick as it is. And now on to some larger things. This is a species which came to the UK market last year and was described by Dr. Ralph Brits at the Natural History Museum. This is Channa pulchra. Pulchra means pretty, and you can sort of see why if you can find something that's about a foot long and eats anything it can get its jaws around. Pretty, I do personally, but that's just me. And this Channa ornata pinnis, another new species from exactly the same region of India. The two species are virtually identical, except in slight morphological DNA characteristics. But they are both very nice, both sold very well for upwards of about £100. Sorry, especially for this species. I saw someone was selling them for £250 for a fairly small juvenile. My friend was one of the people to first get some of the imports in, and so he kept them for a while and found them to be a fantastic species. And indeed they are. But there are species of Channa, which are these snakeheads, which are coming into the UK with no scientific name, like Channa platinum, which is to me it looks quite boring, it's just a sort of silvery colour, but to some snakehead enthusiasts, this is a pride and joy, and someone was selling some for, again, about over £200 recently, which is more than I would pay. Or this Channa species, fluoro green, which is a rather electric green. That light is a little bit artificial. Someone's obviously shining a torch from it on the side to make it appear shinier and greener than it actually is, but it's still quite a pretty species. And finally, my favourite is Channa species Assam, the Assam region in India. We have one of these in one of the CFZ tags. It's the smallest species of snakehead known, only gets about 3 inches, which is small when you compare it to some of its larger relatives, which hits them 3 or 4 foot. There have been reports of those individuals actually killing humans in defence of their nests, but that's another story. They're very pretty indeed. It's probably going to end up being a geographical race of a described species because it's got almost identical colour patterns and fin ray counts, but it's a lot smaller. And sticking with the theme of fish in the CFZ menagerie, this is Aquadens species Peru. Now, I showed some of you, and also been showing people around today, the CFZ grounds, and you will have seen these fish as the very small, dull-looking animals in the conservatory, who are all hiding behind rocks. This is a breeding adult, looks a lot prettier than the ones we've got. Again, it's undescribed, it's known to genus level only, Aquadens. But we shall see if someone comes along and does a taxonomic review on it. We also have Thorichthys Mexico Blue, which are up in the pub. If anyone's been up to the pub and has been sober enough to look into the fish tank in the corner, they will have found some juveniles of this, which are a very pretty little species, rather outgoing compared to the last lot. But again, no one knows quite what they are. And finally, some Microbia species Zingu Redcheek, which Ross, the fellow at the front here, John's nephew, has. There he is. Who has some of these in his tank at home. This is a breeding male. You can see some of the eggs below him, as well as a rather overexposed female. These come from the Zingu River, which is a tributary of the Amazon in, obviously, Brazil. And that's all we know about their habitat in the wild. They're quite closely related to the Aquadens I showed earlier. But we can now move to something a little bit more impressive, a shark. Shark in the pet trade. This came into a pet store in Germany and was not sold, and so they gave it to an animal rescue centre, who decided after a bit they couldn't keep it properly. So they gave it to an aquarium, who kept it in a large vat out of the way of public eye, and eventually gave it to a zoo, who looked at it from the side and said, well, that looks a bit funny. It's got red bristles, as you can probably see, which attract the growth of algae and help camouflage the fish by breaking up its colour and its outline a little bit. It hops around in a sort of fun little froggy motion, unlike most sharks. Its irises, as you can sort of see, are permanently open, which is, yes, a very, very dark environment indeed. But the most amazing thing about it is it's got 5 gills. Now, other sharks which have 5 gills are the big guys, the megamouth, the basking shark and the whale shark, which are all planktonic feeders. Now, this species in captivity takes more bulky items like fish and bits of crab and things like that than any of the other 5th gill sharks do in captivity. Whale sharks have been kept in captivity, and they are not known to take as larger items to their body size as this little fellow does. No one knows where it was collected. No one knows what it is. It's now good. It's now being kept in captivity for a good few years. She's about 70 centimeters long. She's not grown, and no one really knows if she's going to get any bigger or what. I was talking to Dr. Darren Nate in the corner there earlier, who mentioned that a juvenile basking shark had only recently been found, and that it had a nose which curved around, similar to this one. And of course, the basking shark's a 5th gilled shark, just like this. So whether this is a juvenile of another species of planktonic feeding shark, or a juvenile of a planktonic feeding shark which we don't know about, no one knows until she dies and she can be dissected. We don't actually know what on earth she is. So we just have to wait and see. And our final vertebrate is Cuthbert. Cuthbert was a turtle, again given by Darren Naish back a few years ago to the CFZ, where he lived with a mate, Spot, and Gladys the red-headed slider, who again, some of you might have seen earlier. All the experts who had to look at him haven't got a clue what it was. They suggested it might have been an emydid of some description, but I'm no herpetologist, I've no idea. But it looks more likely to be a hybrid of 2 different species. No one knows quite where it was collected. It was bought in by a pet store. Someone bought them, grew them up, realised they couldn't care for them, and then gave them to... Is it Portsmouth you work at, Darren? It is. Portsmouth University. Where eventually they filtered down into our hands. Spot died in 2004, and Cuthbert died in 2009, which was a big shame. But we still have their bodies. We still have their bodies, which we will give to an expert when we find one that thinks they have an idea what they are. So that has given you a very quick review of the different species of animals that turn up in the year to the pet trade. Both science and cryptozoology could learn a thing or two. That new animals aren't being discovered in the far-flung forests of Myanmar, but actually from your local garden pet trade. Do you have any questions, John?
Yes, we have. What's that beeping noise?
Aliens.
Okay.
That's what worries me. I hope they've got cake.
We all do.
Do you want to come and swap over microphones?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely incredibly fascinating. The idea that because cryptozoology is about the search for new species of unknown animal. It is not about the search for monsters, not necessarily. And the fact that you can find things that are completely new to science, things that have not been described in your own pet shop. And we can do better than that, because in the break that's coming up, Ross and Max have got some of these things next door. You can actually go and make friends with them. We're going to be doing a proper animal handling session tomorrow. We've got about half an hour with them now. But first, because for the first time ever, I'm not quite sure how you managed this all, but we've managed to knock 5 minutes off the time, so we have got time for questions. Can I have my runner, please? By the way, I don't know if anybody introduced him. This is my godson, Greg, without whom we could not do this thing. Okay, questions? I can see somebody there. Can't see who it is. It's Mitchell.
Run, runner.
Come on, run. Put some sweat into it, boy.
Do you know the turtle which is on the photo?
Yes, I do. I knew him personally, he was a good friend.
Very good. Thank you, Mitchell.
Thank you.
Well, you certainly know about zoology, I'll give you that. The five-gilled shark, has that been published, the description of that will be published in any scholarly journal?
Not yet. It's not actually. It's not actually died. It's still in the. I don't remember the exact zoo that it is being kept in at the moment.
Frankfurt, I think, isn't it?
No, it's not Frankfurt. It's some obscure zoo in Germany, I think. But you can go and visit it. If I actually do remember the name of the zoo, you can go and make friends with your own cryptid. Or you can do that later in the animal handling sessions.
Well, if it is what it seems to be, it could change the taxonomy of sharks quite considerably.
It could change everything.
Anybody else? Questions? Max, you've got... No, somebody at the front.
Question.
It's silence.
Hello. Bristles on sharks. I've never heard of a bristly shark before. Are there other bristly species?
They're not particularly bristly. I'll flick back. You can see that the body shape is still fairly evident, but the bristles are extremely short. You can just make some out. Just sort of above it on the where the patch of red is. That's where the bristles are mainly, and where the
Are these specialised teeth? Because a shark's skin is made of tiny teeth, is it not?
I presume so. Yeah. Again, no one's actually had a proper look. But, hopefully someone will.
Shades of the hairy frog.
Yes, well, it could well be.
Any other questions? Yes, there's somebody at the back and I can't see who it is. I think it is Alan.
I'd like to ask, what would you rate as the strangest thing to have turned up ever in a pet shop?
I think that shark is pretty... That's getting on with a pretty strange one. As is the cockroach, where the males have no wings but the females have wings, which is almost unique, really.
Well, I think the 17-year-old boy that spent 150 quid on beetle larvae is pretty weird.
John was very impressed, but my mum wasn't.
Any more? Well, there's one thing. Let's have the microphone, Gregory. There's one thing that I think is one of the things which I think is important isn't just that there are new species to be discovered, but as Max was saying, there are new species which are evolving, which are speciating, and we don't know why. Because it's not just the search for new individual species, it's actually the search for the paradigms behind them that cause these species. But I hope that the CFZ is going to carry on with one paradigm of evolution and help other 17-year-old boys who want to spend 150 quid's worth on beetle larvae. Ladies and gentlemen, Max Blake.